By the age of 12, I was already stealing packs of cigarettes from my father. I mean, all the older friends in the neighborhood were smoking marijuana. They weren't just smoking cigarettes. So I figured, well, wait a minute, then that's the next step for us. And then it escalated because now I started to lose interest in school. I was kicked off the football team in high school. I dropped out of school as a result of that. And then eventually I got involved in a criminal activity in the local neighborhood. I chose to stop developing where it matters the most. I remember we were hanging out on a church roof, and we were smoking all day long. But there was a police officer that actually walked up on us. She had her gun drawn, and she was so nervous. Her hand was shaking. We basically had no fear of the authority. We had no fear of the police, but we knew that day that we weren't going to run because a woman was so nervous. We feared that she would shoot us. So I was arrested. That was the very first time I was arrested. And I was given a year probation. I was arrested maybe 9 to 10 months later for hanging out on a street corner and selling heroin to an undercover narcotics officer. What business does a 15-year-old have selling narcotics? You would think that as a 15, 16-year-old that I would have learned my lesson by then, but I did not. I was still smoking, I was still having sex, I was still partying, I was still going to the clubs, to the parties, you name it. Because I hit it big time when I was 17 years old. We had formulated what became known as one of the worst gangs in the city's history. And I was arrested. It was like 15 of us from my community and 15 or 20 from another community, and a huge fight broke out. But the end result, one individual was left in a vegetative state. He was brain dead and he couldn't speak, he couldn't walk properly, etc. As a 17-year-old, the court system decided that the case was so severe that I had to be certified as an adult rather than tried as a juvenile. And it still affects me to this day because I nearly died in my sins. I was given 15 years in the state penitentiary. That's 3 5-year sentences running consecutively. A good thing occurred when the judge chose to accept my lawyer's motion to run my multiple sentences together. So eventually what I'm trying to say is that I just served 5 years in a state penitentiary, but I was 17 years old when I went in. The life I thought was good and justifiable fell in on me, and I realized for the very first time in my life that my life had been an utter lie. The correctional officer, Mr. Gallagher, I remember his name. He told me, Cartagena, there's a letter for you. I ran as quickly as I could. There was a letter in my name was on the envelope. I went back to my cell. I opened up the letter. There were 2 Bible study lessons in the envelope, 2 Bible. It didn't matter. I tried everything else in life. Why not give Jesus Christ an opportunity to affect my life? Perhaps he could do a better job. I learned all there is to learn about the grace of God. I learned about heaven. I also learned about hell. And on the back side of the second lesson, there was a sinner's prayer. I knew that I had to make a decision, accept Jesus Christ into my heart as Lord and Savior. That day was the beginning of my life. It almost felt as if God entered my cell and said, you've mugged people all your life. Now is your turn to be on the receiving end of a mugging experience. I felt the weight of sin, but I also felt the love of God. God actually loved me. How he loves me. How he will always love me. How he loves you. And let me tell you, it wasn't easy. Those first steps after repeating that sinner's prayer, it wasn't easy. I had so many issues. My issues had issues. Every night I wept. I put my sheet over my head, turned my back on my cellmate with my Bible underneath, and I wept like a baby. I wept like a baby. God was relentless in his pursuit. I want to give you the opportunity to become like Meshach, Shadrach, and Abednego. They were relentless in their pursuit of God. They knew that their God was real and that God desires for you and I to serve him in spirit and in truth. He's asking you to stand up. He's not asking you to be perfect because it's impossible to be perfect this side of heaven. That's not the challenge. The challenge is to be committed. There are wondrous things that God can do in your life if you just simply commit and be relentless.